And we're broadcasting.
Okay.
Hello out there.
Welcome, everyone. Mitch is on fire.
People's attention if you want to capture leads, right? Gotta grab their attention.
That's right.
What it's
about. Take note of this, everyone. You may see Mitch like this maybe once a month. But he's on fire today, so welcome, everyone.
I'm just trying to make a point.
Absolutely. So welcome today. Today we're going to get into something, obviously, which many people have been waiting for quite some time, which is to really start getting into the funnel control and the actual lead capture all the way on through the back end of the sales process. So today's training session, we're going to be focusing specifically on lead generation. So if you don't already have your software open, go ahead and open it up so you can follow along. That'll make it even better. Before I continue, I just want to draw your attention to the poll that is out there, because as you know, the training is just going to continue. Once we finish with these sessions, the training is going to be an ongoing thing where your members area is regularly updated. So one of the things we're curious about is in terms of the type of training that you all enjoy seeing the most, we wanted to throw that at you. So for those that might be seeing this in the members area and don't have access to the poll is basically asking which type of training would you actually prefer to see. One where we actually go through and build out an actual specific example with you and for you, sort of a hot seat type example. And speaking of hot seats, we are probably going to do the very first hot seat section starting next week. So check your email and be on the lookout for when that hot seat session will be scheduled. And more importantly, anytime between now and then, if you are interested in actually being one of the hot seat spots where we work privately with you on the training, going through whatever it is that you need us to help you with there, make sure you email support@controlwriter.com so that we can get our list together and make sure we give those people their opportunity. So first question is, would you prefer that type of approach via the hot seat or us building the actual case out for you? Or would you prefer that we do a sort of an outside best of the best, so to speak, case study where we review other examples of great ads, great lead gen, great sales pages, all of those? And mind you, we're going to be doing all of that together, not just one or the other, but we're always curious about which one you prefer to see. So, because we want to be giving you more of what you want. That all said, Mitch, I think we're just going to go right into the software here, and we're going to start right away with getting to funnel control and today's training session on lead gen.
All right, so we start.
So let's go ahead and get that open.
So again, across the top, we're let me just lock in the software. Locked in. Yeah. So across the top, you've got, of course, your position control tabs, which we've covered. The core elements, we've covered the story, rejections, influence have all been covered at this point. We're moving now to the funnel control phase on the right-hand side of the software, and we'll start with lead gen. I've got some noise here, so I'm going to switch over to my headset. There's the kids home, and they're just going to be loud and noisy, and I can't control it. If I thought I could control it, I'd be fooling myself anyhow. So I shall switch my headset over here. 1 second, folks. Sorry about this. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, good. All right, so
nothing to reinforce the regular guy factor, like having your kids crying in the background and stuff.
They hopefully with the with the headset. Let me take off the. I'll show you.
Should be better. Yeah.
I'll show you, folks, what I'm doing. I've switched to a behind-the-ear headset so I can hear and speak, but this close microphone to my mouth is much less sensitive than the one that picks up, you know, the room sounds and stuff. So back to the software. So we're looking at lead gen tab. I'll just quickly go through the bubbles on the lead gen tab.
Mitch, before you do that, can you bring up what we were talking about earlier, actually, before the call? Because it's something very important that I want to make sure everybody realizes. Just about the way the software works and the power of what you have at your fingertips here in this process. You know what I'm referring to?
No.
I don't mean to be cryptic. Just to tie in with the position control.
Oh no, we're going to talk about that when we talk about what Sean is referring to, since it can't be cryptic anyway, is that
we were discussing, our little strategizing, 5 minutes before we started the call. So just a few minutes ago, we were strategizing. Okay, let's just make sure we're, clear on what we want to cover and whatnot. We don't jump on here unprepared. We only jump on here slightly unprepared. So I was mentioning that it's very important that we want to point out in discussing the lead gen, and this will go through the entire funnel control, that this part of the communication phase, let's say, where you're not going to start communicating with your prospective customers and think about what you're saying to them, displaying to them, showing them, we don't want to ignore everything we thought about before. We don't want to ignore the entire position control tab. In fact, the whole entire position control tab, which included thinking about the core elements, thinking about your story, identifying your objections, and ultimately identifying different points of influence, is also now you can communicate those in the lead gen component. So that whole phase was for the sake of what we're going to do now.
Correct. Yeah, it's really important that we mention that, because what happens with a lot of people when they're going through the process is that they sort of do these things independently and it's separate. And it's like, I remember one day when we all way back when we had our marketing strategy and planning and our branding session, we did this, and this, and then on any given day when we start to generate our ads, or when we start to really prepare the core of our sales messaging, they don't really refer back to that. And if they do, they've got to go somewhere else to do it. And the power of all this is that we are regularly going to be referring back and forth between the two. So that said, let's get right into lead generation, beginning with frame.
Okay, so frame is the context in which you are going to present your product or service to your customers. That's a very broad definition. But what I mean is, you're going to, from the moment you introduce the frame, that's going to set the entire context from the moment they begin to have an awareness of your product or service, its existence, and what it is for them, what it means for them, all the way through to the transaction, through the retention phase. In other words, this is what you're, as far as the specific customer, this is what your software service is for them. This is how they are going to conceptualize, understand what it means for them, what it's about for them. That's your frame. You're setting the frame.
Right, and I think the key thing to point out there for everyone, Mitch, is that this is you setting the frame for how you want people to see your message. Okay, it's not, they may have their own interpretation, but the point is that it's you that controls the frame. You are setting up for how you are ultimately hoping that people are going to perceive the message. And the best example and metaphor for the frame, of course, is what you may have seen many times with that image of the director sort of framing the shot. If we widen the frame, you're going to see something totally different. If we make it more narrow, make it a different shape, whatever the case may be, that's controlling the frame. But this is most definitely something that you are specifically thinking about yourself, because you want to really be thinking through how people may perceive what it is that you're messaging, the different ways that they can jump off that message, and so you want to adjust the frame accordingly based on, again, Mitch, if we jump back into core elements, based on the positioning that we found between the work that we did earlier. So understanding the consumer, understanding their circumstance, we are adjusting our frame accordingly to meet what those needs and what those specifics are in those areas. So back to lead gen, and let's see. Back to lead gen and moving on from frame. And again, just a reminder to everybody, although you are not seeing a public chat, when you have specific questions, make sure you go ahead and type those in and ask it to us so that we can cover something or circle back if something's not clear. We want to make sure that you have ample opportunity to ask your questions and help us to re-clarify, give an example, or whatever it is that you need to make this more valuable for you.
So in terms of expanding on these ideas of frame, in terms of, we never went through the top, so do you think it's valuable for me to just go through it, or we'll just go through them as we work our way through the software?
I think we should. Yeah, I think we should just stick with the breakouts, and then we can talk about when you say top. Are you referring?
I was going to go through all the different options, but I guess it doesn't matter. We'll get to them when we get to them.
Yeah.
So we're already into frames. So let's just continue. So I think in terms of frame, my thinking about frame is, first of all, the goal in marketing is to speak specifically to a prospective customer, and you want to communicate what your product or service, and this is where I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit, what your product or service means for them. And that's where the core elements, as Sean said, he brought up, is that you want to look at your core elements, and certainly as you identify potential consumers of the core elements. For instance, with this software, our Control Writer software, we've got a version of the software that is specifically for screenwriters. We've got a version of the software that is specifically for presentations. We've got a version of the software that is this for marketers. So we've got 3 different ways of approaching our software. Now, really, they are different pieces of software, but conceptually, one could say that we would set a different frame for each one of those. Am I being clear there, Sean? That for a screenwriter, we want to say, hey, this is the software that's going to help you break into Hollywood, right? And then the frame is, I'm just throwing this out there. The frame is, hey, don't you want to break into Hollywood, and frame it around that, or write the best screenplay you ever could. Whatever. In other words, there would be your frame. For presentation, it's something about presentations. We're gonna grab your audience, keep your audience, sell your audience would be the frame. In other words, and for marketers, it's about building campaigns that will just work over the long term, and that might be our frame. But we would see that in the core elements. That's kind of where I wanted to go with that. That if I've done my work with this about this software in here, if I have my screenwriters all broken out into here for how I'm going to sell my screenwriting software, what I would see is the preeminent distinction of my software, and I'm probably going to try and frame it around that. Or I'm going to talk about the ultimate outcome, what it means for this. I'm going to frame it around that. Now, I'm going to find a point within these core elements to use as my frame, and then you could that's where we get into split testing, which I know we already want to talk about, but we might have 5 or 6 different ideas out of the core elements where we could frame it in different ways. And we're going to talk about split testing, I'm sure, before this call is over.
Right, and keep in mind also that, and we're going to be getting into this in a minute, but there's a difference between the frame and the headline and the hook, and a lot of people confuse the two. The key thing to remember about the frame is that what you're doing there is you're setting the context, and I always love to return to the great example that Mike Filsaime did and likes to do many times, because it's just a perfect example to use a film example, which is, and some of you may not have seen it. So if you remember the movie Pulp Fiction, the scene before the Bruce Willis sequence where he's actually going back and they forget the watch, it's that brilliant scene with Christopher Walken talking to a young Bruce Willis's character where he basically explains the whole history of that watch. Okay, and then what happens after that, he wakes up in a flash, and then he's in the hotel room and they're ready to go, and he realizes that he doesn't have the watch. And you just don't understand how big a deal that is if you would not have seen the scene before it. And so when you take that and that's a perfect example of setting the frame and really identifying the critical context for why that watch is so important. So when you translate that into an example in your marketing, part of what you might be doing is you're telling the story and setting the frame. And again, some of the frame setting comes after somebody's already seen the headline. But as you're starting to think about the message and what you want people to take from your message, you may be drawing upon a particular story or drawing upon a particular event or something that's important so that you can really anchor in the headline that you're giving and give it a better context. The frame is what does that. It sets the context for your message. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you have questions or you want some examples, please chat or ask anytime so we can come back to it and give some more.
Right, and I think that, and you brought up the next 2 points with the headline hook and the point of intrigue, even the visual element. It's all about setting the frame. Now, the frame is for your own reference. In the software, you would say, this is the frame I want to set. I want to set the frame of, screenwriting, using this software is going to make you write the blockbuster screenplay of the century if you use this. Do you want to write the blockbuster screenplay of the century? Becomes sort of like your headline hook, but it's playing into the frame that you're trying to set. So the frame is sort of identifying, conceptualizing what is the frame I want to set, and then how do we do that? With the headline hook, the point of intrigue, the visual elements all combine to, start to build and and weave that frame, set that frame. I mean, is a better word.
Yep.
And that the headline hook, of course, is an attention grabbing. You got to remember when it comes to marketing that people are not interested especially when it comes to lead generation. They're not interested in you, your product or service. Now they might be, depending on specifically if you're a plumber and someone's got water pouring down on their head, they're definitely interested in getting a plumber in their house really fast. But they're not necessarily.
But even then, Mitch, it's they're not interested in you, the plumber, and that service. They're interested in the result. They're interested in getting to you because they believe that you are going to be the one that's going to fix their toilet or fix the leak or whatever the case may be. They're always interested in the result. And the one exception to that, when somebody has sort of reached the holy grail of their branding as an individual, is that they become their own celebrity. And so, for example, if you're calling talent agencies looking to hire a particular artist for your special event, then you're interested in that particular individual. But sometimes it's not even that. You just know that you want an individual for your event, and any number of individual people in that category would do. A great example of this, by the way, is a really cool site called Thuzio.com. It's Thuzio, and basically what they've done is they've taken current athletes and former athletes and basically found a way to easily give you access to those athletes for a number of different services. I think they've got like video messages that they can do for $99, which is pretty darn cool. I mean, you think some of those are Hall of Famers and legends, and if you want to send somebody a happy birthday greeting from a sports legend who they just love for $100, I mean that's pretty cool. They have things like have lunch with them or have breakfast with them for $500 or $1,000 or a couple thousand, and then of course for larger events or gatherings and the real superstars on the site, it may cost $10,000 or more to actually get them to an event. So using things like that, even something like that, it's really a service. It's the service of getting a well-known entertainer or figure to your special event. So even then, I'm not necessarily looking for one individual. If I go to that site, I'm just looking out of curiosity to see what they have to get a particular result. But circling back, Mitch, to the headline and hook, and a reminder of the points we were making earlier, or I was making earlier, all of those components, as Mitch pointed out so acutely, they're all part of setting the frame. I think a lot of people think that the frame is the very first thing you do, and there's only one component to the frame, when in fact it's really a combination of those things. Starting with, of course, the headline, which is the first thing that they see.
Right, the headline is the big attention grabber.
Absolutely.
Is water pouring down on your head right now? And there's a picture of water pouring down on the head. And the point of intrigue is really the defining point of why they should consider doing business with you. The headline, the hook, calls out the problem or the opportunity. The visual element supports that position. But the point of intrigue now, it starts to become about you specifically.
Absolutely. And so let's just go over, just a couple of examples, because, what happens is, as you're going through this process, and remember that, now that I think of it, we might not have made this clear, that in terms of the lead generation process, what we're talking about here is the very first element in the sales funnel. So although it's the first tab and may be obvious, it may not be obvious to everyone. So I do want to just circle back and point that out. We're talking about right now not only the first element, but the first part of the first element, which is that you're basically designing your ad. And whether this is a Facebook ad, whether it's a Google ad, whether it's a magazine ad, whatever the case may be, right now your goal in the first component of lead generation is ultimately to get them to learn more into the next step. And we'll come to that in a moment about what that conversion point actually means and how they're all so important. But this first part of the process is people are being introduced to you and your message, and you are trying to grab their attention and get them to take the very next action. So So in terms of a headline and hook, obviously, depending on your audience and your marketplace, there are a lot of different angles you can take right now. So for the plumber, there are a lot of different things that you're going to use, a lot of different headlines or hooks that you might use based on the level of urgency and or the circumstance in this case of
and this goes back to the core elements. It's why are you marketing? What is your positioning statement essentially for a specific target market? I mean, and how do you what service, what core product or service are you selling? In the case of a plumber, what's the core service that he's trying to market to specific people? Obviously, when he's trying to reach the people who are in an emergency situation, it's a whole different approach than someone who wants to get a toilet installed, because that may or get their bathroom redone. Totally different circumstance.
All of which still need the plumber. Or someone at least who's skilled in those areas. Again, it's a combination of the demographic itself, meaning who that customer is, or excuse me, the consumer, but also what is their specific circumstance? Is it an emergency? Is it like 24 hours or less? Another great example, by the way, just to pivot a little bit, is what I see in Florida all the time are some really incredible billboard air conditioning ads. Okay, some of them like to use the hook of urgency. They're like, look, 24-hour service calls, like guaranteed, like we'll be there in an hour. Your air conditioning is broken, and we will be there guaranteed in an hour, or you don't pay a dime. So that's one particular hook, the urgency. Get there to get your house cooled. And again, of course, in Florida year-round, that's an important factor. Another great one, which has been running.
But that may not be a preeminent distinction. In Florida, there may be that's just something they have to provide. In other words, to even be competitive in that business, like if you don't provide that, you're losing a market share that just is going to ignore you. So that doesn't necessarily mean that's their preeminent. It could be if it was unique and the first person who did it was probably a preeminent distinction. But these things are the marketing like that is constantly changing because you're always got to be on top of it.
Absolutely, and Mitch is absolutely right. It's not necessarily the preeminent distinction, but it most certainly is a hook or a headline for that particular advertisement. In this case, it wasn't an online ad. This was a billboard. Another one, which everybody loves around here, is as you're driving down, actually I-95 South, there are billboards that just say in big bold letters, "Your wife is hot. You need to get the air conditioning fixed," as the subhead right underneath it, which is brilliant. I mean, it's been running forever, and obviously it's running forever, so it must be effective. Totally different frame. It's a different level of urgency, but it's more of an attention-grabbing hot. It's playing off a totally different theme, obviously something a little more inciting or even bordering on sexual, if not overtly sexual. And calling attention to that factor. So again, same approach, same business, same basic consumer marketplace, only using an entirely different headline, hook, and approach. So let's move into, unless you have something else to add, Mitch, let's move into point of intrigue more specifically. And
I'll let you get started on that. I'm going to try and actually bring up a couple examples here. I'll lock it on the software and you can talk for a minute. I'm going to try and find a website.
Click open to help just so people can see also. I always like to remind everyone, in case you're seeing one of these for the first time, that if you're ever lost, in addition to the actual training videos themselves, which you can always click to and access right through clicking watching the training videos, that takes you directly into your members area, and it opens up the section that has all this training. But again, this point of intrigue is really about your thinking about, where is that awareness and curiosity in your prospect going to be coming from? Because again, what your goal is here is to get them to take that first action. So they see this and they're looking at your ad and they're seeing it for the first time, and in most cases an advertisement is an interruption for somebody. You have to remember that you are ultimately interrupting their day, whether your approach is through a cold call, whether it's through an online ad, a magazine. It is interrupting the flow of whatever it is they're doing, even if it's the Facebook news feed. It is something that they either weren't expecting to see, may not want to see. And so the point of intrigue is arguably right on par with the headline and hook of importance as far as really understanding how to break through to your audience to get them to want to learn more. So again, when you're trying to get them to take that action, we can close that help bubble, Mitch. When you're trying to get them to take that action, some of the best brainstorming that you can do here in the software and this process is to really come up with a number of different point of intrigues that coincide with your various headlines and hooks. And then directly along to that, Mitch, we go right to visual elements. These are just literally, you know, the visual elements that you're going to use as part of your initial ad and your initial message to help bring out that attention. When you're talking about Facebook ads, you'll hear a lot of people talking and training about some of the types of images or elements that tend to get great attention. You know, things like the cats or the babies. Totally out of context sometimes with the message, but because they draw intrigue or they get people interested, they suggest using images that have those kinds of elements or those kinds of curiosity factors that people can do. Now, I would argue that just simply getting clicks and not thinking about where you're going with the rest of the process is a very quick way to go broke on Facebook, as opposed to simply getting the clicks and getting a high click-through rate. Ultimately, what's most important, even way beyond the click-through rate, of course, is what you get at the end of this, which brings us right into conversion point number one, and that is get the click in this stage. The reason I'm calling attention to it here is because in all your work to get the click, you have to remember that what's coming after the click is ultimately the very next thing, which we scroll all the way to the right. The next conversion point you're going for is going to be to get the opt-in. And so if what you're using in your visual elements, your points of intrigue, and your headline and hook are designed only to get the click, but you're not ultimately thinking about how you're going to get the opt-in, then you're really missing something. And by the way, this is the very reason why we included all of these two steps under the same lead generation tab, because there are two parts of this process. There's the first part, which is getting the click, and the second part is getting the opt-in or whatever action you want them to take. Watch the video, download the report, you know, register for this webinar, whatever the case may be. It's critically important. So let's just circle back here, Mitch, and once again, I know we've done it early on, but let's go back and redefine what we mean by a conversion point.
Okay, and so go ahead. You wanted to correct it? Go
ahead.
Again, the idea of the conversion point is that there comes a time where we discussed this previously, I believe, is we discussed the idea of the value proposition. And I think it's very important to understand that every single thing that you're doing in terms of acquiring customers, selling customers, providing a product or service is providing value. And the customers are going to decide if the value you provide is something they need, want, desire, right? And is it worth it? In other words, against those need, wants, desire. In other words, if I've got a pipe that's burst and it's pouring down on my head, there's a value to getting that fixed. Now, that value might be very high if I'm getting wet and my food's getting ruined and my kitchen's flooding. Whereas there would be no value for a plumber if it's not burst. So the value there's a measurement of value. Everything we do, every decision we make is measurement of the value, what I get out of something, and what it costs me for that thing. And intrinsically, people want to make sure that they are paying less, they're getting more value for their money. That's the exchanges. So I will give you a copy of my software in exchange for some of your money, and there's a value exchange. And you get, ideally, more value from using the software than the value I would theoretically get out of the money. And that goes for every single transaction. But the transactions are not just financial always. Sometimes a transaction could simply be click. That's something you've asked me now to click. You've provided me with a headline, the point of intrigue of that there's some kind of magic formula at the other side of this click. You know, this I've seen these ads. You know, this mushroom. If you take this mushroom every day, you know, you'll live to be 150, kind of thing. You know, that would be a point of intrigue, by the way. You know, it's the reason I should be interested. The visual element, some kind of close up of the mushroom, and now you want me to decide, am I going to go further with our relationship?
Correct.
And what is the value I get? Well, the value I get is based on that point of intrigue and on the visual element, and the headline is saying there's value if you click here. What's the cost to me? I got to click. So the cost is a click. The value is what is built into that, really into the point of intrigue on some levels.
But the cost is actually more than the click, everyone.
Go ahead.
Because when you think about it, there's, and I'm going to switch over to a Facebook feed in 1 second and just show a couple things here. But the cost is your time. It's always your time and your opportunity cost. It's, do I want to look at this versus something else? Especially in a situation of Facebook where you're literally flooded with so many different, visual stimuli, or just the internet in general, anytime you're online. So it's more than just a sum of all I need to do is click. It's, am I going to click on this and spend my time here, or am I going to spend my time elsewhere? So instead of clicking on your ad, do I actually want to watch the cat play with the ball of yarn? Whatever the case may be, you're always making a choice. And so all of these things are leading up to the element of the first value equation, which Mitch is alluding to, which is getting that click. Is it worth it for you to spend even just a moment of your time clicking through to see what we're talking about on the other side? So, and I mean, it's just when you look at it, just all I need to do is go, and I think I need to share my screen here, which I will do in 1 second. Screen share. I'm having an issue with this feature, which is the imperfection of webinar jams sometimes.
Maybe it's you have to maybe stop sharing. Maybe I'll stop sharing.
Maybe let's see if maybe only one of us can share. That shouldn't be that way though.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's flat out not working. Do me a favor. Do you mind just going to your Facebook feed or going to one of our page feeds?
Okay. Let me share my screen again. Bring up.
And there's nothing scientific here, everyone, that we're about to do, but it's just kind of a quick reminder. Like, all you need to do is look at your Facebook feed in any given moment, and I mean, just look at the right side alone. Okay, on the top, you've got trending. You've got that distraction. I can tell you, I'm much more curious about LeBron James at the moment than I might be about seeing my own offering conversion control ad. Okay, that's just me personally. But at any given moment, there's going to be somebody who has no interest in hearing about the LeBron James story. But although it does look kind of interesting, looks like it looks like the decision may have actually come. Might have been late on some of the T-shirt campaign.
Yeah, I know Gary is from, I believe he's from Cleveland, or
yes.
That's probably why he's
interested. There you go. So maybe it is official. I think one of the guys had talked about it being a 100% thing, but I digress. In any event,
Gary was also at NYU with me and Andy.
Gary Nadeau was okay, and
yeah.
so here you go. So you've got.
There's a picture of me from high school. Someone decided to post.
You've got LeBron James. You've got all the different Facebook stuff over here, and all of these things. What are they doing? They are competing for your attention. There's millions of people all over the world screaming for everyone's attention.
Like this dude getting thrown. Like, they're not trying to sell anything, but this is kind of, I want to see this. And this dude is off his motorcycle.
Right. OMG. Okay. So just again as we go back to.
Let's take a look.
Okay. Session.
There you go.
That's pretty rough. All right. Let's go back to the software.
Everybody wanted to see that. Come on, everybody's like, yeah, play it.
Yeah, that's right. It's on Stunt News. If anyone wants to see that again, it's on Stunt News. But anyway, I think you all get the point. It's just one quick glance at the.
I'll post it on offer conversion. Oh, we'll put on offer conversion control.
Yes,
our Facebook says, if you want to see it, you got to like our Facebook page.
Right. Anyway, all right. So back to the software. If we go there, so keep that in mind. So as we're getting that click. All of these elements, you can never really consider too much when you're thinking about making the best possible impression. And again, Mitch alluded to split testing and running different variations, but we're going to cover that, I would say, less in this particular call and more so as we really do an entire section on testing and ways to work with that. But just suffice it to say that at some point you will be testing a number of different versions of all of these ads, but you're not going to do that until you have an ad that you know at least is working at all. Until there's any kind of an offer that's generating results, then there's no point in split testing the different factors of a non-working offer, so to speak. So let's scroll down to the right. So
we should also talk about the difference between this phase and now this phase. We get into now they get past the click. Now they're on theoretically your website or your advertisement, or if in the case of, let's just say it's a print ad, they've made a phone call now to you potentially. So
Correct.
now we're thinking about a different kind of conversion. We're thinking about a conversion where they're going to schedule something or opt in, or they're going to take that next step and it's a bigger commitment now.
Right. So now when you talk about this, so they're now past it. They're now onto what is either your main landing page, your lead capture page, or because there's a number of different forms of execution. Again, this is something we'll go over in future training, show you a number of different examples of all of these. But specific to say that now you've clicked or you've called or you're into the next phase where you're going to be presented with some sort of request for an action, and there's going to be part of your message to explain to people why they should be doing that. And again, back to Mitch's value equation, at this stage just the same, even more so than just getting the initial click, you're looking for someone to clearly see the value in what it is that you're offering them that's worth it for you, for them to register for a session, or to give you their name and email, or to call a certain number, or to mail in a card, whatever the case may be. So once again, if we look at the elements, we're back to the headline and hook. The definition here is still the same, but now you're considering it from sort of a different angle, because now you're on the page that needs to get them to do something even more, which is give them more of their value versus what you are currently offering them. So there's a different consideration that needs to go into that.
But it's very important that it's all congruent. I mean, that's probably one of the most critical things, is that from the moment they start all the way over here, and we haven't gone that far yet, but even as we move through all these tabs, from the moment they are introduced to your frame, this is a continuation of the frame. So the same frame is at play here. The hook, the headline, the hook, it's about the same frame. It's about the same thing. The visual element is an expansion on the same frame, an expansion on the previous visual element, preferably. Right. It's relevant. And now we'll talk about state your proposition.
Well, before that, just one thing you might notice here is first question you might say is, well, why is the point of intrigue missing from here? Don't you always have to have intrigue? Yes, of course you do. The difference is you're no longer trying to reach people at the point where they're in a full distraction mode, and you're simply trying to grab their attention. And that's the distinction. So whether or not they're 100% engaged at this moment, the point is they have decided to take the first action with you. And it's critical to understand that. So if you were to try to come up with some entirely new point of intrigue and not begin to advance the conversation at this point, you'd actually be taking them backwards and not forward. So again, at this point, you've still got your headline and hook for your page. You've got the critical visual elements that you're going to consider, but now it's time to state what you are proposing. Here's what we're offering. This incredible training video is going to give you a chance to check out something we did. It's very powerful. I suggest you check this out, etc., etc. This free guide is going to give you everything you need to know to start an entirely new Facebook fan page and generate 1,000 likes in the first month. Download it here for free. Okay? You are clearly stating what it is that you are proposing. People can get a value from what it is that you're offering them. And this all leads, of course, to the next conversion point, which is get the opt-in, or get the phone call, or get them to take that next action that you want them to take in the process. So, Mitch, anything to add on those examples?
Obviously, we're mixing up a couple things here. I mean, and just for the sake of, in the case of, let's just say the phone call, and that's what I'm talking about. The phone call probably would be here. Or or it might be where they consider calling you, or they look at your ad. Maybe is the way maybe you would consider if I'm looking at a paper Yellow Pages ad. So the headline, hook, point of interest, visual element.
The phone call would probably lead to get the appointment.
Right, would lead to get the appointment, which again would be a conversion. And it's not, again, the phone call might come here. The phone call might come here depending on how you set up your process.
Right.
But ultimately, the transaction is probably to get the appointment anyhow. If you're a plumber, for instance, but you know, fundamentally the principles are all the same. You know, if I get a phone call and the woman's screaming, the water won't stop, I can't turn it off. You know, it's state your proposition. We can have a plumber there in 20 minutes. It will cost you $300. Do you want it or not? You know, it's a pretty easy proposition in that case.
Correct.
You know, but you know, and the transaction then becomes less. You know, I guess the point I'm trying to make is this may be kind of combined. It's one thing, the phone call, and then the transaction here is the actual sales call on the phone.
Well, it's gonna vary.
The transaction.
Look, at the end of the day, Mitch, and everyone for that matter, it's the need for detail and the need for an expanded process and an expanded message is always going to vary based on the degree of your circumstance. Okay, someone who just walked through Death Valley. Okay, in fact, I have a friend of mine who still holds the record for the fastest time in running through Death Valley in that desert. And someone who just comes out of a desert, there really is no sales pitch necessary than extended arm holding a bottle of water. Someone running through a marathon, same thing. Extended arm holding a bottle of water. No message necessary. And the same is true with a plumber. Okay, if you're in a small town and you know that there's one plumber that exists in that town, and you've got a toilet that's about to overflow, and you're not a handy person, you know, nothing else necessary than a quick phone call to that particular plumber, or you know, a text to them, and then they respond, and whatever the case may be. So again,
so you're framing this, Sean. I'm going to just turn the software off for a few minutes because you're framing this from the point of view of the consumer. Whereas the people who use our software are the plumber, but notice the preeminent distinction that plumber would have. That
Correct.
Plumber's preeminent distinction is he's the only plumber in town, right? He's the only guy with the plunger in town. Let's say.
Well, but to your point, Mitch, it's actually both because, and actually, I'm glad that Mitch brought this up because you do have to think about this from both sides. Regardless of the fact that you are the vendor with the product, you need to get in the mind of your consumer. So as you're setting up your campaign, as you're working through what the hook is, what the frame is, what the point of intrigue is, what the visual elements are, and ultimately what your proposition is, just because you're not the consumer, it doesn't mean that you don't have to get in the mind of the consumer.
Well, but that's where we go through the core elements, and that's the process of going through the core elements, is because the plumber in that case is a very, very clear example where he's the one guy who's got a plunger in town and someone's toilet's overflowing. He's got the monopoly on it, and everybody knows him if it's that small of town.
No, of course.
Not most people.
In that case, they do have more of a preeminent distinction. But just to clarify, what I was referring to simply is that based on your understanding the circumstances of your customer from the work you did in core elements and from everything before this, that's going to shape how you approach your messaging in this. If you know that that your advertisement is going to be seen by a group of people that fits this particular category, that meets these criteria, that are in this demographic under this circumstance, that dramatically shapes how and how much you're going to message your ad. It might not be necessary to say much. Whereas you may be in a marketplace that is totally overcrowded, totally oversaturated, and there's a much deeper educational process that's required to get this. And this sort of gets into, in some cases, your level of market sophistication, or how far advanced the marketplace that you're working with is in terms of your product or service. Sometimes it's everybody knows about it. They're just looking for the fastest service or the cheapest price. And other times it's much more of an educational process because they don't even know that something like what you offer exists. So you have to understand, where you're coming from and all that.
Yeah, and the other thoughts I had on this that we should talk about is the introduction of your story in this. Notice that there's no real story. The story gets much more involved when we get into the transaction, and we use something that we call story lead. But your story, the context of your story should be built into the frame. So when you talk about your frame, your story, because remember, if you get your preeminent distinction correct, I was trying to demonstrate the software, but I'm the one on screen, so you didn't see my software. So if you get your preeminent distinction correct, it links up to your discovery within your story. So immediately there's a congruency between your story and your preeminent distinction. And now if your frame is the introduction of your preeminent distinction, it could also be the introduction of your discovery. Because by introducing your discovery, you are in fact introducing your preeminent distinction or some component of your product or service that's very unique and powerful, and then your headline hook, your point of intrigue, and visual element are actually doing a double job. Not only are they getting the attention, they are beginning to introduce your story, and they're beginning to introduce very deep value aspects to what you're all about.
Okay, so Max, are you able to screen share again? I'm still not.
I can screen share, yes.
So I can't show it. So back to the software. Let's just recap. And again, sort of a last reminder as we sort of come into our review here. If there's any questions, anything you want additional clarification on, please be sure and type those. I'm going to go ahead and remove this sticky and just type it real time because of the delay. Any last questions? Type them. All right. So back to the beginning. So again, so in the lead generation, again, this is the very first time that you are meeting your potential audience, and the most critical elements to consider are the frame, the headline and the hook, the point of intrigue, and the visual elements. And it's of course the headline and the hook and the point of intrigue, along with that visual elements, that are going to all contribute to what goes into that frame and how it's set and the context with which you want your audience to be seeing your message. Again, it's sort of like you are the broadcast station and you are controlling what's being broadcast. That is the setting of the frame. And again, the goal here ultimately, to not overthink it, is you're looking to use all those elements ultimately to get people into the next step. And when we say that the singular goal is to get to the next step, it's only in the context of where you know there's going to be congruency in the next step as you continue with the following headline and hook and the visual elements and ultimately your proposition. So you'll hear people say the goal is always to just get to the next step. But if there's no congruency between the two, that's how you find that your numbers and your conversions ultimately get shifted quite a bit. I've seen these mistakes time and time again. You'll see people. And frankly, what's so beautiful about the process and the way we use metrics and analysis nowadays is that you'll always know where your process is breaking down based on where the results and the numbers are in any one area. So when you know that you've got the problem of, look, I've got all these great conversions and all these people responding to the offer, my biggest problem is I need more people to see the offer. Ironically, Mitchell and I in the Real Writing brand have this problem. We've had astonishing numbers in the screenwriting industry with the plot control software and the training and the framework. The challenge is the traffic and the amount of people who are specifically interested in some of those things. It varies, and it's a very, very targeted market. And so at some point the market gets slightly saturated, and so what you have to end up doing in those cases is carefully experiment with some peripheral marketplaces. So what we've started to do recently is look at some of our core client base and see, what are they doing? Are these people, what type of trades are they in? Are they programmers? Are they developers? Are they strategic thinkers? Are they salespeople? Are they in some way connected with not film and television, but are they all marketers? Whatever the case may be, and we start to look at those trends, because then when you understand that you've got sort of that holy grail, which is a super winning offer, you just need more people to see it, now you're able to expand your traffic sources. Now, in this case, you've got the other opposite end of the spectrum where you may find that you're getting all these incredible clicks because you used a cute cat video, but if you find at the end that now you're selling a financial service which has nothing at all to do with cats playing around in something cute, then you've got no congruency, you've got a ton of traffic, you've spent a lot of money to get those clicks, but they're not going anywhere with it, and so you ultimately don't have an offer that works. But the truth of the matter is, in those instances, when you're not thinking about the congruency, you don't even know that you have a bad offer because you simply are getting too much untargeted traffic. So that's why it's so important to be looking through this process and seeing the congruency between each of these layers and saying, yes, we do want to start with an interesting image, but within that image and within the copy, we want to make sure that we're speaking to the message of where we also want to go in the very next step of the process.
So I've just been digging around here a little bit while you're talking,
Yep.
and I found some ads. So I don't know, I was clicking around, I found some ads, and as I tried to leave this page, here we got a redirect, and obviously these are different ads, and we can just talk about a few different examples of exactly what we've been discussing. Some of these may be good or bad. We'll just see what we're talking about is visual elements here. Protect your pet from charger wires. Obviously, that I don't have any pets, so it's not relevant to me. They're not necessarily targeting, but but you can just see the different ways that they're using here. This woman's skin is peeling off. Wrinkle trick horrify surgeons. So that if I'm my skin's starting to wrinkle, I'm probably interested in that. And it's trying to speak to different people. Must have appliances being sold for next to nothing. So this is money play.
Set the context. Which page are you on right here?
Museum.
Okay, so you're in Museum. So in this case,
and I got the Museum so I got here from here.
Mm-hmm.
I was on Politico. I just clicked on ad here, looking for ads, and I found these down here. So this is sponsored content. And I clicked on 10 shocking hidden moments in Disney films. So that brought me to here. And they're fulfilling something, and ultimately what they're trying to sell is more advertising. What they want is page views, so I'll click on some of the ads that they get money for. So they get paid when people click on the different ads on their page, is my guess.
Yep. So at the end, what I was getting to there with that pop-up is, before you leave, in some cases they want you to, in the marketing world, of course, we may want people using what they call those exit pop-ups instead of an opt-in. In this case, their goal is simply more page engagement. I mean, to some extent, all of us want more engagement with our site or with our product or with the offering, but in their case specifically, to Mitch's point about advertising, they just want people to continue to stay and browse the site. So they're saying, hey, did you know that we have all these great feature articles? You may not have seen them, so check out one of these. And each time they do that, they get somebody to click back on one of those. That's continued page engagement for their site. So their goal in that second part of the lead generation in this case is not opt into something, but it's please continue to stay engaged with our site.
Look here, look at this one here. It's a real engaging image right away. Very weird. Like how many there's 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 sets of 5 hands on this woman's head. So it's an engaging picture. Mm-hmm. If you don't know Spanish, watch this video. So this is going to be for a language-based training. Let's find out which one.
You would think.
And of course, the link is not available. Certainly not what you want to be advertising, but let's try it.
Right.
Look at that. So it's a broken link. Anyway, so what about this redheaded woman? Criminals despise new public record websites. Oh, so I want to go and find out about my next door neighbor, see if they were ever arrested. Again, but you can see just how the intrigue is playing there. Ultimately, if we were to follow these, we would see a lot of them doing a lot of what we're discussing here.
Right. And again, keep in mind as you're looking through some of these, and you can certainly do the same exercises, look to see if the images are not congruent, or if they're totally congruent, if they're just interesting for the sake of being interesting. I mean, sometimes the sort of the headline underneath doesn't match the image at all. I mean, I would say if you don't speak Spanish, watch this video now. I don't think that has anything to do with that particular video. Having said that, I think it's completely intentional. I don't think this person thinks that this image makes you think about somebody speaking Spanish. I think they're grabbing your attention with an image and putting it this right underneath, and like you're
well, probably unfortunately the link's not working, but my guess is it's going to go to like a Rosetta Stone type of site. I was trying to think of one of these, or Pimsleur, I think is another one. And what you're going to do is you're going to get to a page like that, and they're going to talk about how the mind works learning a language, which is why the image is relevant.
Well, we'll see. You're making a big, you're giving them a big benefit of the doubt that they've actually done that. And Mitch may very well be right. I'm speaking specifically about the image and the content. And I can tell you, and the reason I bring this up specifically, by the way, is that one of the recent setups in actually executing this part of your funnel is through a product called Lead Pages. And what a lot of people are doing with their lead pages is they're basically setting up their opt-in pages, and in many cases by design they're using an image in the background that has really no congruency at all with what the offer is. It's simply like an image of a couple in the islands having a nice time, but yet the message of the image is totally different. And what the key is that, and to Mitch's point here, your next step in the process has to either be consistent and congruent with the image or the headline. If it's totally incongruent with either of those, that's where you run into problems.
Right, and ideally you want to find I was locked on me anyway. Ideally, you want to find the right image, the congruent headline, the congruent intrigue point of intrigue. And but by the way, the point of intrigue, as you can see in these, there's a headline and there's an image, and the image is the point of intrigue. They're using the image as that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be copy that's the point of intrigue. It's about thinking about, and that's where a powerful image comes in. That's why we want you thinking about, like, what is a really powerful image about my product or service that would be a point of intrigue? You know, like, and back to the plumber example, like if you have a woman like, with water pouring down, that's the image, right? It's capturing that action moment, like, right? With water dumping down, like, you know,
right.
Need a plumber? Wait, need a plumber? You know? The point is, it's all in the image, says it all. It's going to get the click, you know, it's going to, and then you're going to get them to the next phase of your lead generation.
Right. So again, back to the software one last time, and then we'll sort of close it up here. Again, so as you're going through that process, again, remember your lead generation, really the first step in this process. And just one last thing we wanted to show you, Mitch, if you show them how we have the lead gen. Do you have the latest version open, by the way? Your 1 through 5 options there. Give me just 1 second, because you should be able to. Want to make sure they can see what I wanted to show them here, which is that. Click on just the lead gen tab, Mitch. Are you using an older version? Looks like you've got an older version open there, because they should have the 5 different versions of lead gen there. Lead gen 1 through 5. I think you've got an old version. For those of you that have the latest version installed, when you click on the lead gen tab, you've actually got.
That's right. Now I remember we did do like a sub tabs with the.
So I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, folks, that the screen share is not working. Unfortunately, I've got no control over that in the third-party software we're using. When you click on the lead gen tab, when you have the latest version, you've actually got 5 different lead gens. And to the point of multiple testing, this is what you're doing. You're not limited in each project file to just one version of all this stuff. You can actually think through multiple versions of the different offers and the different ads that you want to be designing for yourself. So what you would see if you're looking at the right version is when you click on lead gen, it actually says lead gen 1, lead gen 2, lead gen.
Yeah, just like here under the transaction tabs, there's, you know, we added like tabs where you have multiple. It's all exactly, they're all identical, but right, instead of just having one lead gen, we gave you, I think, 5.
Yeah, 5 different lead gens.
5 different things, so you can focus on different. Like I said before, maybe you've got different ways of approaching based on the core elements. You've got a preeminent distinction. You've got an ultimate outcome. You've got a superior feature. You've got, you know, a specific circumstance. You want to try all those in terms of lead gen, or just different ways of, you know, the same frame, but I want to try a frame with this point of intrigue and this image and this. In other words, you can just rethink your copy without being stuck in one version. Right. And that was sort of the idea as far as brainstorming and developing go.
Right, and the key is that you're doing it all within the same project file. So you don't have to jump back and forth and create all these different project files. This is just purely from a user experience and a software usage factor. You don't have to jump back and forth between multiple projects. You can arrange all your strategic thinking and get this all mapped out within the same project file for your particular campaign. So with that said, everyone, I think you guys are a quiet bunch today. So either you're really attentive or you're not there. But hopefully, if you're seeing this after the fact and rewatching this, we covered a lot of material in this one section. So, by all means, as we say always, send us your feedback if there are elements that you want to make sure that we are covering in future trainings that you thought we missed. We've got a very thick skin. We want to hear your honest opinions, and we want to make sure that the trainings that we do here are valuable, and most importantly, getting you to be a better user for yourself of the software and process. This is not the Mitch and Sean show. This is the you show. This is the you being able to become a better user of this software as a tool for the process so that you can create, effective, repeatable, and scalable campaigns that continue to bring you better success. So for all of you that joined us live, thanks for being here today. I don't see any other questions, so Mitch, I think we're gonna say goodbye for today. Next week we are going to actually, as I said earlier, we're going to probably announce our first hot seat. So again, if you have an interest in being one of, usually we try to make time for at least 3, and depending on how many people we want that want to be on the very first one, we may just shorten the times a little bit. We like to try to give people at least 15, 20 minutes at least to really dig in and get moving on their projects. So we don't like them to be too short, but at the same time, we don't want them to be 30 to 45 minutes each either. So email support@controlwriter.com and just use the subject line hot seat request, and we'll be able to get you in line and make sure that you are in the order that we receive them is how we will award the actual hot seats for that first session, which will be sometime next week. It's likely going to be Tuesday, but Mitch and I will confirm that and make sure you are properly notified.
I know you'll be notified at least one day in advance. But,
absolutely. Mitch, right. Any last thoughts?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered this thoroughly and beat it to death. So actually, we could probably continue on this for quite a while, but I think it's sufficient for the moment. A good introduction and coverage of the this concept and process within the software and overall.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Always more to come. And again, if you have any questions, things you want to see covered, email support, and we will make sure to include those in either the next or future trainings as it relates. So. And
the next one will be transaction, right?
We'll be covering the transaction tab. Will be the next upcoming one, which will also be next week, almost with certainty. And we may even do 2 different trainings next week to get them covered, because we want you to have these as quickly as possible in your members area to be able to return to and use for you as you go through the process. So everybody have a fantastic weekend, regardless of where you are in the world, and we will see you in the next training.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.